Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, April the 29th, 2024. And this week runs through until Sunday, May the 5th, 2024. I'm going to start by going over the structure of this video. I'm going to begin by doing a blow-by-blow account of what I see as being the main events this week. And there are actually some very important events coming up. There is a Mars conjunct Neptune. We've got Venus moving into Taurus. We've got Mars moving into Aries. And we have got Pluto going stationary retrograde. And when I've gone through these events, I'm going to consider what three of the main events might actually mean in a general sense, perhaps of the world at large. And those are the events of Mars conjunct Neptune, Mars moving into Aries, and Pluto going stationary retrograde. Then I want to consider a couple of people who might be influenced by these events. I've gone for Justin Trudeau, Taylor Swift. I don't know anything about Taylor Swift, but she came up, so I thought I'd very briefly say something about her. And also Harry and Meghan. Not Harry and Meghan as individuals, but about the marriage as a whole. And having done that, I'm going to look at the I Ching for the week. And my I Ching is going to be divided into four segments. There's going to be a general reading, then money, then career and business, and then relationships. And just a reminder, when you come onto the I Ching segment, you don't have to watch it if you don't want to. If you don't watch it, you are not part of the forecast, because my I Ching reading is only for people watching the I Ching reading. So if you don't watch it, then it's got nothing to do with you and you don't have to worry about it. So if you don't want your I Ching done, when you come on to the I Ching segment, you can just stop the video and watch something else. Okay, so let me start off by considering the position of the planets at the beginning of the week. So what we have here is a chart for midnight Monday. I've set it for New York. That is a matter of convenience. There is no special reason why it needs to be set for New York, but that's what I've done. And so we can see the start positions. So there is the Mars conjunct Neptune. So right at the beginning of a week, we've got Mars exactly conjunct Neptune, and Mars is conjunct Neptune, conjunct the fixed star Skeet. Skeet has a somewhat malefic reputation, and it's often connected with shipwrecks, disaster, and just things going wrong. And I'll be talking about Skeet a little more a bit later. And so that's definitely happening. There is Venus at 2937 Aries. So that's a reminder that Venus at the beginning of the week is on the point of moving into Aries, and other things going on. We still are being influenced by the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Yes, that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which was last weekend, it's still very much around, and that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is going to have an impact. You know, we're still going to have a desire to express ourselves, a desire to be free, and we may always be in a situation where we feel if just something could happen, things would be so much better. And so we're always looking for those points of relief when we can finally be got off the hook, when something we're involved in that we don't perhaps really want to be involved in, when we can finally get out of it. And so that is something that we're going to be looking for with this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And yes, it's still very active. There's Pluto. You can see 2 degrees 6 Aquarius. It is about to go retrograde. And when it goes retrograde, remember, it goes all the way back into Capricorn. So we get one last pass into Capricorn, but that's later in the year. In terms of when the big aspects happen, so Monday sees 2 events. Mars conjunct Neptune and Venus going into Taurus. Now, this conjunction between Mars and Neptune, I believe, is a big deal. Monday is when it is at its maximum, and so we can see Mars conjunct Neptune as being about a certain amount of chaos and perhaps misdirected energy. And it's also a time when we should steer clear of water if at all possible. It's not really a time for taking boat trips, but more of that later. Then we've got Venus moving into Taurus. So Venus has been in Aries. Traditionally, Venus doesn't work very well in Aries. And you might think, well, if you've got Venus in Aries in your natal chart, that might be a bit of a problem. Well, I don't think that's the case. You know, if you've got Venus in Aries in your chart, if you happen to have Venus in Aries there, then you have to deal with it all the time, and you do work out strategies. But, you know, when Venus is in Aries, just in general, how do we respond to Venus in Aries when it's in the sky for those few weeks? You know, we might perhaps behave in an inappropriate way. Perhaps our aesthetic judgment is going to be not 100% perfect. After all, Venus is a planet of beauty, so you could argue that when Venus is in Aries, it's not working as well as it should do, and it can be a little bit hasty. It makes sudden judgments. Something looks beautiful right now, but then tomorrow it doesn't look so beautiful. But anyway, Venus is now moving into Taurus. So Venus works very well in Taurus. It's good for relationships. I mean, after all, Venus is the planet of relationships. And so when it's in Taurus, it can be calm and reassuring, and it's very sensual. It's all about touch and getting close. Though I suppose the only perhaps downside of Venus in Taurus is in certain situations people might want to get too close, too much touching. I suppose it depends on the culture and it depends on the people you're with, but maybe there's a certain feeling that some people are being inappropriately close, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. That's just the nature of Taurus. Taurus is quite a touchy sign. By touchy, I mean touchy not as in sensitive, but touchy as in physical contact. But overall, perhaps with Venus in Taurus, we can start making aesthetic decisions. So if we've been putting off making decisions about, I don't know, buying expensive clothes, expensive ornaments, decoration, now might be the time to be putting that into action. Then on Tuesday, which is April the 30th, Mars goes into Aries. So we've had Mars in Pisces for some time, and now goes into Aries. That's a very big change, because Mars, you know, on Aries is a cardinal point. It's a time when we are going to want to take the initiative, or at least many of us are going to want to take the initiative. But the Aries point, it's a general point. It's a point of contact. It's where what happens down here on Earth hits the cosmos. So something new is coming into our awareness, and it is that aggressiveness of Mars in Aries. So in terms of global news, things might start to get more violent. I know that things are pretty violent as they are. There's a lot of aggravation on planet Earth, but we could see more aggravation. So that, I think, is really something that we need to watch, Mars in Aries. And that's certainly something I'm going to be looking at, and I'm going to be looking at the precise point when Mars moves into Aries. Then on Thursday, which is, let's get this right, that would be Thursday, May the 2nd, got cancelled elections in the UK, local elections. Pluto goes stationary retrograde, comes to a standstill. So what happens is that Pluto will now go backwards, and it will go backwards until, I think, the autumn. And sorry, I should tell you when that exactly is going to happen while I'm here. I should have worked that out beforehand. It's around October the 12th. So when Pluto goes stationary direct in October, which would be around October the 12th, it will be at 29:39 of Capricorn. So Pluto goes back all the way into Capricorn, and over the next few months. And so with Pluto stationary retrograde, we may be feeling perhaps that change is arrested. We feel that some kind of transformation was brewing, and then it may reach a certain point and then just halt and perhaps dissipate a little. That is certainly one way of looking at it. But when you have a planet going stationary retrograde, it's like a moment of power. When that planet does become really strong. And so perhaps many of us are feeling the Pluto energy, that we are living in a society that is completely turning upside down. And that's the impression I get when I talk to people. People are concerned that things are really changing, and a lot of people, they want to know, when are things going to get back to normal? Well, maybe they're not going to get back to normal, in the sense that time moves forward. Whatever changes we're seeing, this is the way it is, and we can't put the clock back. Maybe that's what Pluto going stationary retrograde is telling us. Then on Friday, May the 3rd, we've got Mars sextile Pluto. That really very much emphasizes the fact that Pluto is in a strong position. It's strong because it's stationary. And with Mars sextile Pluto, it brings that out, and there may be events which remind us of that. And remember, that will be Mars in Aries sextile Pluto. So there are going to be people out there who are going to really want to take really very strong initiatives. And while all that's going on, the Sun is semi-square Neptune. That Sun semi-square Neptune is going to create more confusion. Remember, at the beginning of the week, we had Mars conjunct Neptune. Then Friday, we've got Sun semi-square Neptune. And so Sun semi-square Neptune, it's not about so much the Sun, really. It's perhaps more about the Neptune. It puts Neptune into focus, remembering that Neptune is moving onto Skeet. But with Sun semi-square Neptune, it could be difficult to get things done. And I think when you got Mars sextile Pluto and Sun semi-square Neptune at the same time, yeah, Mars sextile Pluto wants to do stuff, but then Sun semi-square Neptune, the question is, do we really know what we're doing? Have we really understood the situation correctly? And a bit of caution might then be required at the end of a week if we're planning on taking big initiatives. We might think it's the right thing to do, but actually we may be acting on the basis of misleading information. Now, looking at the planetary's aspects one by one, let's start with the Mars Mars conjunct Neptune. So this is the conjunction between Mars and Neptune, and I've set this chart up for the exact moment that it happens, and this is April the 29th, which is a Monday, and 5:31 a.m. in Westminster in England, or the UK, and there is Mars conjunct Neptune. Now this conjunction between Mars and Neptune is on the fixed star Skeet. So just a reminder about what it means to have Mars conjunct Neptune on Skeet. I'm looking at this book, The Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology by Vivian E. Robson, BSc. This is a very old book, relatively old book. I think he was a librarian who just was into fixed stars many years ago. And so he talks about Skeet, and he says that it causes extreme misfortune, murder, suicide, and drowning. You see, it's a fun star, is Skeet. And conjunct Mars, he says, many accidents, bad for gain, sickness to natives and relatives. Then with Neptune, he says, prominent in inventive, occult, or psychic matters, persecuted, peculiar domestic conditions, many accidents, danger of drowning. So you get the picture with Mars conjunct Neptune, conjunct Skeet. I think that it's a time when we certainly have to be very careful when dealing with things connected with water. And this is not just about Monday, because Mars is getting closer and closer to Skeet. Skeet itself is very close to actually 0 degrees Aries. So the beginning of the week, Mars is on Skeet, continues to be on Skeet. In fact, gets closer to Skeet. So, don't take boat trips. Avoid going swimming, unless you absolutely know what you're doing. There are lifeguards. If you have plumbing issues in your house, or your apartment, take them seriously and make sure that if someone tries to fix them, they really know what they're doing. And consider what can go wrong with water. And it's not just water; it's just accidents in general. It's just difficult. Mars conjunct Skeet. Remember, I think in the last video I was talking about nuclear accidents, and I mentioned that at Fukushima, the big accident in Japan in, when was it, March 2011, Uranus was conjunct Skeet, and that was a nuclear accident that was initially caused by a tsunami, and that knocked, I don't know what that did, that knocked out the cooling systems or whatever, I don't really know the details. Okay, this is not Uranus conjunct Skeet, this is Neptune conjunct Skeet, but there is increased possibility, increased chance of natural disasters, things just going wrong with Neptune conjunct Skeet. And with this Mars-Neptune conjunction, it might be useful to consider where this conjunction might be most powerful. So I'd kind of like to set up an astrocartography for this. Let's set up the world, see if there's any. So there's a map of the world. It seems that the Mars conjunct Neptune is going through Iceland. I don't know what's happening in Iceland. I mean, probably nothing much. As I do say with astrocartography, it can be somewhat hit and miss. The Mars-Neptune conjunction is on the midheaven. You probably can't see it because it's a bit blocked, but this Mars-Neptune conjunction is going through the midheaven in Mumbai. So I don't know. I don't know what happens in Mumbai, but well, that used to be Bombay, isn't it, in Western India? So perhaps in Western India, one needs to be a little careful with Mars conjunct Neptune, and so that might be something to consider. I'm not going to go on and on about this, but okay. But from a perspective of Western Europe, the Moon is conjunct the midheaven, going through the British Isles, and I suppose this is a reminder that this week is the council elections. Okay, I understand local council elections in the UK are not necessarily a big deal, and very often people use it as an opportunity to make a protest vote, but in the general election people go back to often voting for the government. But I suspect that's not going to happen in this case. But I think that the council elections, perhaps in the UK, are they in Scotland? I don't think they are in Scotland, but are they in England and Wales? I don't know. I haven't been to the UK for since 2019. But the council elections could be quite major in their own way, not necessarily just because of the results, but because of the impact they have on society, or maybe it's just what is happening in the UK this week. But the Moon on the midheaven, the Moon represents the public, and so there is a lot of uncertainty in the UK at the moment, and obviously. And okay, maybe, I don't know, look at Madrid. The Moon is on the midheaven in Madrid. Again, I don't know what's happening in Spain. But that's something that comes up. So that's the astrocartography for Mars conjunct Neptune. Then, on the next day, we have got Mars moving into Aries. So this is the precise moment that... Okay, well, let's start off with the UK. This is the precise moment that Mars moves into Aries on April the 30th, 2024. This is quite a problematic chart from the perspective of the UK, because there's Mars at 0 degrees Aries, but the ascendant, if you set this chart for London, is 1 degrees 27 Libra. So Mars is exactly on the descendant. If you set the Mars Aries ingress, if you set it for London exactly on the descendant, and that really might highlight Britain's enemies. I mean, the 7th house is enemies, or Britain's perceived enemies. Countries always do this. They like to imagine that they've got these enemies, and I suppose right now Britain's number one enemy is Russia. So Britain may be having all sorts of imaginings about Russia and what Russia could do, and I've already noticed very quickly in the news there was some fire in London, I think, and I think there was some suggestion that Russian agents might have caused it. It's kind of going back to the 19th century with the Russia paranoia. As I said on several occasions, if you want to understand how ingrained Britain's paranoia with Russia is, go read Kipling's book Kim, talking about India and in the 19th century and Russian agents trying to undermine the British Empire. So there's Mars on the descendant. So that does look potentially rather difficult for the UK, with the emphasis on outside forces worrying about that. What are they trying to do? Then let's look at the Mars ingress from a perspective of Washington, D.C. the seat of government of the US. So that's why we set it for Washington, D.C. And we have got 0 degrees Leo rising. So that means that there's a Moon-Pluto conjunction. Now, that's perhaps the key point about this, the moment of Mars moving into Aries. At the precise time that Mars moves into Aries, the Moon is also conjunct Pluto, and of course Pluto is about to go retrograde. So with the America, similar picture than what you've got with Britain, but not Mars on a descendant, the Moon conjunct Pluto on a descendant. And that's kind of almost more weird and psychological. Moon conjunct Pluto, having these complete fantasies about who your enemies are. And America will be seeing its enemies left, right and centre, I suppose China. And of course it goes back to Russia and obsession with outside forces. And usually when you've got something as psychological as that, Moon conjunct Pluto, you've got the government going on and on about its external enemies, trying to undermine the country, all that sort of Russiagate and Hillary blaming the Russians for losing in 2016, and just not actually having the awareness to look at one's own problems. America is not considering its own problems as a country, but is projecting it onto other places. And with that Moon conjunct Pluto, I think that this Mars in at the same time as Mars moving into Aries, I think that we can see increased paranoid rhetoric about America and its enemies, and that may be paired with actual action. And of course, it's not just Russia, it's China, it's Iran, anything except for what's actually going on in America. That's probably where the real problem is. So perhaps in that case, sort of country's psychology is not so different from individual psychology. We always like to project and refuse to accept we've got our own issues. So that's the second big event I want to talk about. And then the third big event is Pluto going retrograde. And here's the chart for Pluto going retrograde. So this is the precise moment that Pluto goes retrograde. And I make it 6:43 in the evening in London. So setting this chart up for London, the midheaven is 4 degrees 24 Leo, and the descendant is 4 degrees 24 Aquarius. So set for London, Pluto is pretty much on the IC. And so again, things are stirring under the surface. And of course, March the 2nd is the day of the local elections. That's great, isn't it? Having local elections on the day that Pluto goes retrograde, and certainly having Pluto on the IC on that chart does indicate that there are real rumblings under the surface. Let me just show you that on a map. See, there's that line with Pluto on the IC, goes through London, goes through Madrid again. Is there something going on in Spain? I don't really know much about Spain, but that might be something to consider. Then it goes all the way through, goes down through Algeria, West Africa. And so I think this place is this is certainly highlighted. And so that's it. I think that's the main place that sort of comes to mind. Western Europe, Western Africa. I suppose one might want to just for the sake of completeness, Let's just set that up for Moscow. See if there's anything. Let's relocate that chart for Moscow. Why not? Yeah, if we relocate the Pluto, if we relocate that chart to Moscow, we see that Saturn is quite close to the IC and Uranus is quite close to the descendant. And maybe this Pluto retrograde is going to have some impact on Russian society. We're talking about enemies again, Uranus on the descendant. Maybe some of these long-distance Ukrainian rocket attacks are going to have an impact. Saturn on the IC as well can be the foundations of society. I don't think we're going to see society being overthrown or anything, but when I looked at the chart for when I looked at the Mercury going stationary direct chart, I think I did that last week, and I set that for Moscow, and there was some issues going on, and I think we know that Ukraine has access to new weaponry, and I suspect that some of these weapons are going to go through in a more spectacular way than has happened in the past. That they're not just going to be pinpricks. Russia, by the way, also has to be careful. Going back to the Mars-Neptune conjunction at the beginning of the week. So Mars-Neptune conjunction, the Mars-Neptune conjunction is about accidents at sea. And as I understand it, what's going on in the Ukraine war is that, yes, in overall, Russia is certainly winning this war, and I believe will win this war. I don't know how you define victory, but one area that Russia does seem to be struggling in is the Black Sea, because of the impact of sea drones and missiles, and they already, right at the beginning of the invasion, they lost this big battleship. I can't remember its name. And with Mars-Neptune conjunction, I think that Russia has to be really, really careful over the next few weeks in protecting its fleet, and perhaps you're thinking about the bridge. So this Mars-Neptune conjunction could be very difficult for the Russian Navy and what's going on in the Black Sea. I mean, I don't think it's going to have any impact on how the war is going to run its inevitable course, but still Russian astrologers perhaps need to take note of this Mars-Neptune conjunction. So those are a few points about the general and general and sort of global picture with these aspects. And I now just want to look at a few people. I'll start with Taylor Swift. Again, I don't know anything about Taylor Swift. I know she's very rich and very successful. As far as I'm concerned with Taylor Swift, you can just ignore everything in her horoscope about Neptune in Capricorn, except Neptune in Capricorn. She's got Neptune in Capricorn. That's really all you need to know about Taylor Swift, as far as I'm concerned. We don't have a time of birth for her, by the way. Neptune in Capricorn. Neptune, in one sense, it doesn't really work very well in Capricorn, because Capricorn is all about transcendence, isn't it? Moving beyond one's boundaries, letting go of what one has, and seeing the bigger sort of cosmic picture. But when Neptune is in Capricorn, and I hope I'm not offending anyone who has Neptune in Capricorn, it can't really function as it should, because Capricorn is thinking about money and transcending in such a way that one can materially benefit. So one is reaching out to this huge audience across the world, but all the while one is thinking about the bottom line. And I think that is how Neptune in Capricorn is perhaps working. But that's pretty irrelevant. I mean, one other thing, I remember reading this book I can't remember what it was, when I was learning astrology in the 80s, and the suggestion was that Neptune was exalted in Cancer. I do not believe that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto rule any signs, that they have any exaltations. I don't accept that. But I think this book was suggesting that Neptune was exalted in Cancer. And if Neptune was exalted in Cancer, then it would be fallen in Capricorn. I don't know if Neptune has an association with Cancer. It certainly doesn't rule Cancer or is exalted in Cancer. But I get the concept that Neptune doesn't really function very well in Capricorn. Of course, it functions very well in terms of Taylor Swift and her bottom line. But the transcendence is all about her being more successful and getting rich. And can that really be true transcendence? But anyway, the point point I wanted to make about Taylor Swift is that her Venus is at 1 degree 59 Aquarius, and we don't know exactly what time she was born, so it could be 1 degree Aquarius, could be 2 degrees Aquarius, I don't know. But the point is that Pluto is stationary retrograde on her Venus. And I noticed from the newspapers I think she's in a relationship with some football star. I'm not really interested. But in terms of her relationships and how she relates to other people, having Pluto going stationary retrograde on her Venus may be a bit problematic for her. There could be issues of power and control, and I suppose if she's got Venus in Aquarius, she is going to, I suppose, value her independence. And if she's in any relationship with Pluto conjunct her Venus, she may be thinking about this very hard and hold on, does she want to actually give anything away? And that may be something going on in her life. So that's Taylor Swift. I said I don't find her very interesting, but I thought I had to mention her. Then here's someone who we all find really interesting, and that is, of course, Justin Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister. And Justin Trudeau has his Mars at 29 Pisces, and his Mars is actually square. He's got his Mars square the Sun, and he's got Mars opposition Pluto. So if you have got Mars opposition Pluto square the Sun, I know that Justin Trudeau sort of gives the impression as being a nice, liberal, globalist kind of person. Wouldn't hurt a fly. But he is someone who fundamentally does value his ability to control. Power is very important to Justin Trudeau. No doubt about that, with Mars opposition Pluto square the Sun. And I know that many Canadians are concerned about him and how he uses power. Now, we have got a Mars, there's a Mars-Neptune conjunction right on his Mars. And it sort of hits his Pluto. In fact, Mars, having made the conjunction to his Mars, in fact, it is his, let's get this right, it's his Mars return. So Mars returns to where it was when he was born. And actually, I think I might actually have a look at his Mars return chart. But with Mars conjunct Neptune on his Mars, I think that he is going to certainly want to assert himself, or if this is happening right now, but he might get confused. He might start to assert himself in the wrong way. Yes, he has Mars opposition Pluto. He's someone who really does like to be in control, and right now he really does want to be in control, but that Neptune may be undermining him, and that Neptune is not going away. Okay, Mars will move into Aries and be gone, but Neptune goes stationary retrograde in a couple of months' time at I think 29 degrees 55 Pisces. So he has got Neptune conjunct his Mars all the time now. So from now on, his energy and his ability to make things happen, it's being sapped all the time. And so this is a moment where we can see perhaps him weakening. It might not seem immediately apparent, but I think Neptune is going to slowly sap at his power. Now, I do want to look at Justin Trudeau's Mars return. I have not looked at this Mars return chart before, so I'm prepared. I haven't thought about what I'm going to say with his chart, so this is going to be a surprise for me just as much as it's going to be a surprise for you. So there it is. This is the exact moment that Justin Trudeau has his Mars return. So I make it 10:32 p.m. and I've set that for Ottawa. I think he was born in Ottawa. I don't know whether he is in Ottawa at the time of his return. And I would have thought there may be some cause for concern here, because we have the midheaven at 1 degree Libra, and so Mars is actually pretty close to his IC. And so with this Mars conjunct Neptune close to the IC in his Mars return, we certainly might expect problems for him at the very basis of who he is and perhaps his fundamental support base. And certainly there's a bit of anger here. Mars conjunct the IC can be very defensive, but overall I think this could be a problematic Mars return, but I mean, I don't want to say a great deal about it. It's just one thing to look at. I suppose from a positive point of view, you could say that at his Mars return, the moon is at 22 Capricorn and it's making a trine to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So with that moon in Capricorn, very self-orientated, that moon in Capricorn, so it's going to be a time where he is going to perhaps feel that there should be no constraints to his power and how he can assert himself. Moon trine the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, particularly that Jupiter trine Uranus is quite close, and what he's always looking for is ways to get out. So he gets into a difficult situation, he's looking for a way to get out of it, and he's always looking for an escape route. He keeps feeling he's got it, and I think he's going to have lots of ideas about how to manage himself politically. But that doesn't hide the fact, it can't hide from the fact that Mars is conjunct the IC. So deep down there is a fundamental anger, perhaps, with what's going on in his life, what's going on in the country, and that Mars return is going to hold sway for the next couple of years until Mars comes back to his natal position, which I suppose will be in a couple of years' time. So that's Justin Trudeau. And finally, I want to look at Harry and Meghan. I'm not going to look at their natal charts. I just want to look at their wedding chart. So this is when they got married on May the 19th, 2018. I make it 12:39 p.m. in Windsor Castle. And so the marriage chart is important, or at least it can be important. When I was looking at the the chart of, Princess Catherine's wedding to William, off the top of my head, I think there was a Venus opposition Saturn in that chart, and I think that really, really showed that there could be problems coming up there. even though it looked fine on the surface, but you could see the issues there. Then there was one about what was her name, Lady Gabriella Windsor, and her husband committed suicide a couple of months ago, and she's sort of in line to the throne. And she got married with Moon in Scorpio, and there was other stuff going on in that chart. So marriage charts are something we should be looking at. I think more so for famous people. I think for ordinary people, maybe it's not such a big deal having a wonderful time to get married under. But here's the chart for Harry and Meghan. I think one of the things that one can't help noticing about this chart is the fact that Mars is square Uranus. And Mars square Uranus is, I suppose you could say it's quite independent-minded, but it's also quite accident-prone. Things happen in this marriage, don't they? So how does that relate to what's actually going on right now? Well, let's put the wedding chart in the middle and put on the outer wheel, we've got the events happening today. Pluto is going stationary retrograde at 2 degrees 6 Aquarius. So Pluto is going stationary retrograde right on the Mars of the wedding. That could create trouble. And as Pluto goes retrograde over the Mars, it will be starting to move towards a square of Uranus. And we shouldn't forget that this week, Venus moves into Taurus. So what's happening is that Venus is going to be conjunct the wedding chart's Uranus at the same time as Pluto is going to be stationary retrograde on the wedding chart's Mars. So I think the fault lines in that marriage could be really brought out by Pluto going stationary retrograde. And that's not all. Venus is at 29 Gemini. It's kind of making a square to Chiron. And, Venus square Chiron in a wedding chart, I don't know, the wounded relationship, if you like. But 2955 Gemini, does that ring a bell? Well, Mars-Neptune. There's a Mars-Neptune conjunction this week at 28-29 Pisces. So that Mars-Neptune conjunction is square the Venus in their wedding chart. So at the very least, Mars square Venus, that's going to stir the relationship up. But then you throw Neptune in there as well. And don't forget, Neptune goes stationary in a few months' time at 29 degrees 55 Pisces. So that's going to be exactly square the Venus in the weddings chart. So that's another thing to worry about. And then finally, icing on the cake, look at the midheaven. Assuming we've got the time right for this wedding, Uranus is about to conjunct the midheaven. It's already, you've got Jupiter's already conjunct the midheaven. So this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on the midheaven, you could say, well, it's about them finding freedom through their marriage, but that would have already happened, isn't it? And they've had their freedom, they've escaped from England, they're able to do their own thing, but it hasn't really worked out too well, has it? But that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and particularly that Uranus on the midheaven, I suppose that is how the midheaven for a marriage is how the marriage is seen in public, how it relates to the public, to the world out there. And so with Uranus on the midheaven, that may change, and there may be events which could have an impact on the relationship. So what I'm really trying to say is that this wedding chart is essentially hit by all the main things going on this week. The Mars conjunct Neptune squares the Venus. Venus in Taurus is conjunct the Uranus. Mars moving into Aries. Well, Mars moving into Aries, Mars moving into Aries, if you're into Chiron, Mars hits the Chiron just after it's made the square to Venus. And of course we've got Pluto retrograde, which is exactly on the relationships Mars, and is starting to square the relationships Uranus. So I don't know what's happening in their wedding, in their relationship. We might not know in the first instance. I mean, they do like to manage their image, and so there may be tensions going on at first we don't see. But I do think that what's going on this week may make the marriage that much more difficult, and as I said, it may start to really open up some major fault lines between the two of them. Okay, that is enough astrology, and I am going to finish by looking at the week from the perspective of the I Ching. And just a reminder here that if you don't want your I Ching to be read, then you don't have to. It doesn't have to be read, because what I'm doing here, it only applies to people who watch the I Ching section. If you don't watch the I Ching section, it doesn't apply to you. So if you want, you can just stop watching the video here. Right, so I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, April the 29th, going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got, and this is where I start looking at the I Ching from a general perspective, the first hexagram I got was hexagram 51, which is thunderbolts. The Wilhelm translation uses the term the arousing, the indication that something is happening that we weren't expecting. This great force is making itself felt. But I think thunderbolts, which is the translation of Greg Winkup, seems to be more appropriate here. And thunderbolts does give an indication of shock, that we were expecting things to turn out in a particular way, and things happen, which we hadn't really planned for. And there can be a moment of panic. But what the I Ching says is that we need to keep our cool, and actually we can keep our cool. It's about just not dropping the sacrificial spoon. So the sacrificial spoon is a spoon. I suppose it's full of incense, and we're putting incense on the fire for some ritual reasons. And it's not so bad that we drop the incense. So we can keep our cool. So it's really not the end of the world. And it may actually work to our advantage if we handle the shock correctly. And we have 3 moving lines. The bottom line moves, third from the bottom line moves, and then the fourth line moves. So with the bottom line moving, we get the idea that it's a temporary disadvantage. We may feel that things are bad, but that's because it's just a new situation. We don't really understand it. We assume the worst, but if we actually think about it, it's not so bad. And that is our immediate response to when things happen that we really weren't expecting. Then the third and the fourth lines move. And this is interesting because normally in the I Ching, the third line is unfortunate and the fourth line is not so bad. But actually, in this situation, it's reversed. And with the third line, we have this realization that whatever's happening, this shock, this surprise turn of events, we do realize it's not good. But we have the opportunity to escape. And so if things, we have a chance. We don't have to hang around and wait for things to get worse. So that's the third line. The fourth line is saying the opposite. It's saying we just hang around, fiddling while Rome burns, and we don't escape, and disaster beckons. And the fourth line, if you actually look at it, I was looking at the James Legge translation of the I Ching, and that makes a point here. Why the fourth line is unfortunate. So if you look at the fourth line, fourth from the bottom, you can see that it's on either side of it are broken lines, and so these three lines, broken, unbroken, broken, represent the abyss. They represent mud, and I suppose falling into a hole, perhaps. And so we just hang around and we just get covered in mud, and it's just a disaster. But I think what we have here is choice, a definite choice. Where do we quit the hexagram? Where do we escape? Do we escape at the third line, or do we try to escape at the fourth line? By the fourth line, it's too late. So it may be a situation where we can escape, or we can stay where we are. It's up to us. If we exit the situation, we've done it, we're out. If we don't exit the situation, then we're in trouble. So there is a choice there. When things start going wrong, make your exit and don't hang around. And this hexagram, it moves, and it moves to hexagram 15, modesty. And modesty is as it sounds. It's not about show, it's not about drama, it's just about, maybe in this situation, things returning to normal. So ideally, we are in a difficult situation. Perhaps we've overstepped the mark, we've taken on too much, perhaps we feel we're almost on the brink of disaster, but we pull back. We don't have to make a show of anything. Maybe we can cut back on expenditure, we can cut back on some of our extravagances, and things can return to normal. But it's certainly not a time when we're trying to impress people. And maybe this is suggesting that, having escaped from a difficult situation, what we just need to do is just keep a low profile, and then things can return to normal. Looking at this, the I Ching reading from a perspective specifically of money, I think it's fairly clear what this means. There is a situation that we're moving into, 51 Thunderbolts, that could be financially very dangerous. It could be expensive. Now, I must make it absolutely clear, I am not giving financial advice. This video is purely for entertainment purposes, but if you're into some entertainment, then I would say that from a financial perspective, this week you have to be very, very careful, because there may be some news or something may happen which could be financially threatening. Although there is no need to completely panic. So the first thing that happens is bottom line moves. Something happens and it doesn't look good, but there's no need to panic. You understand the situation. If you think about it, you don't have to drop the sacrificial spoon, and anything going wrong may in the first instance be temporary, and you can regain your composure and start thinking about it and what best needs to be done. But then as you move into the third and the fourth lines, you start to realize that perhaps you're dealing with a financial commitment, or perhaps a financial promise you've made that is not going to work. You have to get out. So if you've been planning, for example, on spending a lot of money on something, then and you've got misgivings about it. You don't feel it's the right things to do, and information may come your way. I think that's the key point, because it won't just completely come out of the blue. There may be an event which suggests to you that there could be financial damage if you continue with something, or if you decide to continue with a promise that you've made to someone, and you have a chance to get out. It's sometimes difficult to get out, particularly if you've made promises, but you have a chance to say no, you're not going to make the commitment, you're just going to move on. But there's a possibility that you don't get out, that you stay with it. It's easiest to stick to your promises, it's easiest to carry on with an expensive venture, and you carry on with it. Then the I Ching is suggesting potential disaster. Do remember, this I Ching reading is for entertainment purposes only, so I don't want to over dramatize it. And just remember, this I Ching is just for a week, so there is a certain amount of hyperbole and exaggeration in terms of this video, but do be careful there. And there is a strong suggestion that you should get out before it's too late. And this hexagram, Thunderbolts, it does move to modesty, and from a financial perspective, you've hopefully realized that you had perhaps overcommitted yourself, and that you'd got yourself into a dangerous situation, which you hopefully had got out of just in time. And now, with modesty, things return to normal. And from a financial perspective, that means you suddenly realize, or not even suddenly you realize, you organically realize that it's just time to spend less money. You don't have to spend money on show. I know that Venus is going into Taurus, and so with Venus going into Taurus, there might be a certain tendency to spend money on, I don't know, beautiful and expensive objects. There can be something a bit indulgent about Venus in Taurus, but I would resist that temptation in most cases. Modesty is about just keeping things simple, not boasting about how much you've got. And yeah, if you're able to just escape from this overcommitment, and I think you will be able to escape from this overcommitment, then you can cut back on your expenditure, and I think that looks to me like quite a comfortable way to end the week from a financial perspective. Turning to career and business, if this is appropriate for you. I don't know what you're doing. I suppose it depends on you. The first hexagram is Thunderbolts. So if you are working, if you have your own business, if you're applying for a job, I think that great caution is required, because you might get some news or come to a realization which is not very easy. You may suddenly realize that things aren't as good as you'd imagined, or perhaps, if you're in a job, maybe your employer appears to be making a decision and you might panic. Your first impulse would be to panic because the bottom line is moving. But you have to sort of evaluate the situation and work out whether, work out how serious it is. In the first instance, I don't think you do have to panic or do anything too serious. But then we move to the third and the fourth lines. So there seems to be a situation at work or in your business, if you happen to be working, it depends, that is potentially really quite dangerous. And if you were to proceed with a particular initiative, then I don't think it's going to work, because you're starting to understand the facts of the matter, and you have a chance to escape. So, perhaps if you were running your own business, you might be contemplating maybe a big investment or a new venture or some new way in which something new, and you're not sure about it, and you're starting to get evidence that this isn't working. And it may be a situation where, what do they say, the first cut is the cheapest cut, that if you can get out of that situation the moment you see it going wrong, then you'll have missed a bullet. But if you stay with it, it will, perhaps because of just plain inertia on your part, it's just going to get worse and worse. Though there are other ways of looking at it. I suppose if you're in a job which is completely dangerous and you realize it's dangerous, then you may have a chance to get, I don't know, let's say you're a mercenary. If you're a mercenary watching this, then wherever you are, and you're watching this, then it's quite obvious. You have one chance to get out. That's the third line. You realize you shouldn't be there. And if you're in the middle of a war zone, you're stuck in mud. But if you don't get out, you have one chance to get out, to go back to your home country. If you miss that chance, you could end up in real trouble. So that's another possibility. Or if you're self-employed, it could be perhaps a contract you're involved with that's not going right, or something like that. And you just have a chance to get out, and you have one chance to get out. You might feel no, you're just going to carry on because you don't want to lose the business, or for whatever reason it's going. But it is about cutting your losses, I think, to a certain point, to a certain extent, and it may just be a direction. So perhaps if you're looking for a new job, you may be starting to commit yourself to a particular direction, and you've decided to ignore all other possibilities. And maybe the indication here is that the precise direction you're going is you've already had some turbulence, and you're starting to see that it's not really working out. And maybe this is a suggestion you should just back off and start moving in another direction, because if you keep going in this direction, you may be over focusing and you may actually not get what you're looking for. So yeah, it to an extent does depend on your situation, though hopefully you will take the path of the third line rather than the fourth line. So when you see that things are really difficult, you will just quit the situation and move to something else, and what do they say, cut your losses maybe. But must emphasize, this video is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not giving any financial advice, and this hexagram 51 does move to hexagram 15, which is modesty. So assuming you have managed to escape whatever that bad situation actually was, and perhaps we're now talking more towards the end of the week, modesty. This is just keeping a low profile. There's nothing that you have to do. It's not a time for boasting, trying to get attention. It's just this quiet sort of feeling of relief, perhaps, that you've got over a difficult situation. No need to do anything else, just bide your time. And next week, new challenges, but I think the week, from a career perspective, if you handle things correctly, should end on a quiet and perhaps reassuring note. Then we have relationships, and so much depends on what kind of relationship you are in. You know, if you have been in a relationship for decades, maybe it's a marriage or something like that, then I think it's not as dramatic as if you've just met someone for the first time yesterday. I mean, if it's a marriage, it's not. We're not going to be overly dramatic about it, are we? But shorter term relationships, we would expect more drama and more turbulence. So with thunderbolts as the first hexagram, it does seem that there are some relationships which have the capacity to surprise. And again, this is especially if you don't know someone very well, if it's a relatively new relationship, or it might actually be about suddenly getting involved in a relationship. But it's all a bit of a shock. And you might see an aspect of a person's personality or behavior that you hadn't seen before. And this relationship could be a business partnership where you've got some joint venture, or I suppose it could be, if you're running your own business, I suppose it could be a relationship with a client. But you may see something that is quite shocking and quite surprising, and you really didn't know this about this person. Or perhaps a relationship has started to move into a new direction, a new area, and as a result of moving into this new area, something is happening again which you weren't really expecting. First instance, first line moves, there's no need to panic, because you're just seeing someone for what they are. People are always going to be, to an extent, unpredictable. And I think one reason that people are unpredictable is that people are often projections, aren't they? When we meet people, we don't see them as human beings. We just see them as projections of ourselves, and we dump all these expectations onto them. And maybe this is a part of what's going on. We've dumped expectations onto someone, and we expect them to behave in a particular way. And we haven't actually allowed them to be individuals. But when we actually start to see them as individuals, that's when the surprises happen. That's when perhaps the shocks happen. And that first shock isn't a particularly big deal. It seems to be a temporary problem, but we get over it. But then something more fundamental happens with the third and the fourth lines. And with the third and the fourth lines, if you're dealing with someone, where it's a new relationship, someone you've only just met, third and the fourth line may indicate as soon as there is trouble, real trouble, you start to really understand what someone is like, and you don't like what you see, then get out. Don't hang around. Don't be tolerant. Don't be patient. Just leave. I think that's the advice there. First real sign of a problem, first real sign of incompatibility. Again, I'm not necessarily just talking about something romantic. It could be about a friendship, could be something to do with a business partnership, whatever it is. First signs of trouble, first signs of you seeing something shocking about someone, I would have said you have to drop it, because if you hang around and you get really closely involved with someone, it may be more difficult to get out, and you may get yourself into a really difficult, intractable situation, and nothing good can come of it. Of course, if you have been with someone for decades, it's a different picture. It may be that you were perhaps trying to move in a particular direction at a particular time with an existing relationship, and that direction isn't working, or perhaps you were trying to getting involved with a partner or a spouse in a particular venture or in a particular direction, or you had some plans to do something, or I don't know, go on holiday somewhere, and you start to work on it, and then something goes wrong, and maybe this partner, spouse responds in a very negative way, and it's just saying, well, back off. That is not an area we should be going in, and that would be one way of handling it. So I'm not saying that this is all about a relationship breaking up, because this is a 1 week reading. It's only going to be about a breakup if it's a relationship that has only just started. Okay. I think in the vast majority of cases. Although I suppose if 1 million people were to watch this video, of course, statistically, there would be some long-term relationships which would break up over the next week, statistically. But I don't think 1 million people are going to be watching this video somehow. So this hexagram 51 thunderbolts, it does move. It moves to hexagram 15, which is modesty. So once you've got over this shock, and hopefully you've retreated, if it's a short-term relationship, maybe you're able to quit the relationship, or if it's a longer-term relationship, you have decided that a particular venture or particular direction you were planning on going isn't such a good idea, then with modesty, I do think that things can just return to normal. There's nothing that has to be done. Be comfortable with existing relationships. Don't try to impress anyone. That's really important. Whatever you're doing, don't try to impress anyone. If you feel that you have offended someone in the past, don't make a special effort. Be down to earth, be modest. Don't feel that you have to lavish praise on anyone or to apologize. Just be yourself and allow things to return to normal, and then the relationships that are important to you, the ones that are always there, they will give you what you need, and you will be able to provide support to your loved ones, the people that are important to you. But the key thing with modesty is whatever shocks there might have been, perhaps in the first part of the week or up to the middle of the week, things can just return to normal. And that is my I Ching reading. So it's a week overall. Looking at the astrology and the I Ching together, I do think that it is potentially quite a dramatic week. We saw with the I Ching, with the thunderbolts, there seems to be potentially a fairly dangerous situation brewing. And I think that this is maybe confirmed by the astrology, with Mars moving into Aries, Mars conjunct Neptune, and Pluto going retrograde. So yeah, we could feel a sense of shock when all this is all happening, and there may be a certain point where we need to just retreat. And so, but we have to look at things, and we shouldn't panic, because I think that we will be able to handle it. So that's all I'm going to say for this week. I hope you found it useful. If you did find it useful, I would be very grateful if you were to like this video. If you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Thanks very much for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.